I think we're going to be live in a few seconds.
Mm-hmm. I'm trying to see if I can find your live stream on YouTube. Mm-hmm. I'll just leave it open on the chat on my mobile.
Yes, I think we're live.
Oh, yeah, we are?
Yes. And do you want me to share the link with you? I
No,
can.
I'm good. I'm good. Yep.
Correct.
All right, let's
Hi,
do it.
Sid. How are you?
I'm very good, Vani. How are you doing?
I'm great as well. Welcome to Kitaabi Cabins.
Thank you. New channel, exciting stuff.
And I'm so glad we're doing this, especially after your conversation with Disha. It was
Mm-hmm.
absolutely amazing. And I must tell you, there was this line that you said during the episode that I went to my desk, I noted down the line. It's called, it's goes. I don't know why I'm fumbling all of a sudden. It says we can never judge somebody else's trauma. And that is
Yeah.
something that really stayed with me because immediately I was reminded of all the times I've judged people and how I'm slowly trying to make my way through this.
Yeah. The reason I said that is because we grow up actually judging people's trauma.
True.
And so I think that's part of what life teaches you, that the day you realize how much your trauma has influenced you, the day you fully realize that
Yeah.
is the day you realize how much other people are affected by their trauma.
Right.
So yeah, I don't know what context we were speaking that in. I think it was about love and breakup, if
Yes.
I'm not mistaken. But yeah,
And
I
you were
mean,
talking how each and every one's individual experience shapes their um, life. But in
yeah.
any case, Kitaabi Cabins is all about books and reading. And I want to start by asking you, what have you been reading?
So all right, this might be very childish. Okay, that book I haven't got. I got a bunch of books because it was a stream on live on books. But
Yeah.
the book I'm reading right now is an encyclopedia called History of Magic.
Wow.
I was in London recently. I was there for almost 2 weeks, and I found a bookstore dedicated entirely to witchcraft, spells, and magic
Wow.
and astrology. I had to go in. I had to. There was no choice. I was very curious. It was incredible the amount of people who are interested in all of that stuff, and I'm a very curious person naturally. So I thought either se kuch to leke jana hi hai. मतलब I have to be a part of this whole world in some way, because it's
Yeah.
so far away from mine, and that's what books do, right? Books are like
Right.
bridges that you can use to cross into places that are completely different from yours. So I got this book on history of magic and witchcraft. So,
Wow. And have you managed to learn anything so far?
well, rule number one is that you never say it. So if I
You just broke it.
no, I can talk about the fact that I am reading it, but I can't tell you about what I've read.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay. Does it
that
include candles and chalk and wheat marking?
Pentagon
Yeah, Pentagon.
and a few skulls thrown in here and there.
Yeah. But
Yeah,
on a serious note, is it interesting? Like, is it surprising you?
it is. What is really interesting is that throughout the years, so the history goes back all the way to, I think, the 4th century.
Hmm.
Uh, so what is very interesting is how human beliefs have changed over time, but have also remained the same.
Oh.
So you might believe in different things. So in 400 AD and 4000 AD, sorry, 400 BC, 400 AD,
Yeah.
2000 AD, we believe in different things, but the way we believe in them has been the same. The reasons we believe in them has been the same. So somebody believing in magic that time and somebody believing in, whatever they believe in today, the essential mechanisms of human behavior has remained the same. So I find that very fascinating.
Oh, that's very interesting. And is there also like this is just very interesting because I'd read so far that there were witch hunts and they were
Mhm.
mostly done so that there were women who would just speak more than they were allowed to, and they would be termed as witches. But is there any truth to that? Like, is that also particularly mentioned in the book?
So it's very interesting that you mentioned that, because from the way that witches have been described, it sounds like they were the first women to stand up for themselves and demand power, demand respect, demand
Right.
like take control of their own narrative,
Hmm.
which I mean, probably one of the reasons why witchcraft isn't as popular now as it was before is maybe because women do get respect. Women are given more of a place in society than they used to be.
Right.
Uh, but we say that here, but you'd be amazed at how active the witchcraft scene still is in London,
Wow.
especially.
Yeah.
There are still those covenants. There are still, the bookstore that I went to had a staircase at the back that leads to a basement where I couldn't go because I wasn't part of the cult,
Wow.
and you needed a particular tattoo to get in. So
That's
and they have those witchcraft ceremonies still going on even in today's date.
wow.
So, yeah, this is really fascinating.
This is so, but I think we have a similar parallel in India, which is called the black magic. And
Mm-hmm.
I really got interested, not in performing black magic, but a few years ago, I was
What they all
reading a
say.
lot of research paper about it. And
Mhm.
I think I read somewhere about how people who are particularly oppressed really play a lot of role in it. How, like in Hindi we say like, oh, that person is occupied by a certain soul, etc., etc., usse mata chad gayi and everything. How they really somehow become a part of everything. And
Yeah.
for certain, like once you actually perform something like that, people actually start respecting you because they think you have a certain connection with the god or the higher power.
Yeah.
And yeah, I
You
think
can
that's,
you
yeah.
can understand why, no? It's like when you have no other power, you need to find some narrative that equates the balance of things,
Right.
right? So it's a bit like so in a school, in a classroom, like say if a teacher were to hit a kid, that kid would be at the back of the class fuming and imagining that, oh, if he had superpowers, the things that he would do to that teacher,
Yeah.
right? And I'll shoot lasers out of my eyes and kids do that, right? It's like
Right.
this fantasy that they live in, where they imagine a particular thing, and then just through that imagination they feel happy. Like it's
Right.
all right, bach gaya. You are so lucky that I don't have this superpower. Otherwise, you would have been so dead right now. And in that imagination, the narrative equates itself, and they feel a little better.
Right.
And it's so important for their mental health to feel better. So I have realized that it is not on us to take away anyone's narrative. Whatever is their narrative that they have come up with to make themselves feel better,
Right.
it is their prerogative. Let them come up with whatever story that they want. If they are being cheated and they come to you for help, then it is you are in a position to tell them. So if they believe in religion and that religion is helping them cope up with life, I have now come to this understanding that let them be. It's not my job as an atheist to tell somebody that their belief isn't real, because God knows I have my own narratives that are complete
Absolutely.
falsehood in my head.
Yeah.
This like stories like the number of Instagram followers is important. Like, what is that? What is that narrative? I mean, who told me that narrative? I created that narrative
Yeah.
because it makes me feel good. So if somebody were to tell me that, listen, it's just an algorithm number, and tomorrow it could just fall to zero with the click of a button, I
Right.
would be pretty annoyed, right?
Right.
But it's my narrative. It makes me feel good.
Absolutely.
So who am I to take away anybody's narrative?
Yeah. This actually reminds me of, so I am very interested with how people, especially authors, play around memories in books and books mostly. So, for
Mhm.
example, there's this book, I can't remember the name of it, but it starts with our protagonist
Mhm.
remembering what happened years ago. And as you
Mhm.
slowly navigate through the book, you realize whatever he had thought of, whatever
Mhm.
he had pictured that it had happened this way, was all false because he wanted to make himself feel comfortable about it.
Right. Right.
And I think that similarly also really helps, or really, that really makes everything that we believe in.
I remember have you seen Fight Club?
Yes. I've
The
read
movie.
Fight Club. I haven't seen.
Read Fight Club. Oh, interesting. I haven't read the book. The movie really hit me very hard, uh,
Yeah.
which is a delightful way of saying it, um, because uh, the whole story is about a man. Imagine, spoiler alert, by the way, but imagining an entire scenario,
Yes.
because he feels like his life is inadequate, and so he creates his alter ego, which to him is the perfect man. He completely creates that out of his imagination, and he lives that life as that person, which I thought was beautiful, because I think that's what all narratives do. In a way, that's what religion also does. You know,
Right.
say that God has created man in his image, but it's actually the other way around. Man has created God in his ideal image. This is who I would like to be. I would like to be that powerful, but I would like to be that kind and forgiving. Of
Right.
course you would. Of course you would. You would love that. So I think this circularity of it is really beautiful.
It is. It
Yeah.
is. And this actually brings me to the book also that I wanted to talk to you about, when
Mhm.
the body says no and the body keeps the score. So
Yeah.
I started reading The Body Keeps the Score. I'm yet to finish it, but I've
Mhm.
already recommended it to everyone I meet. I've been just pushing it on people that you must read The Body Keeps the Score. And I wanted to understand from you, because you deal with a lot of people, I imagine, and how do your unresolved emotions or trauma affect your lifestyle? Because a lot of times we've read in the books, we've seen in the movies that, there's unresolved trauma and that has resulted in, somebody's health degrading. But how does
Yeah.
it actually show up in people when they realize that, hey, this is something I should have resolved and now it's turned up to be something that's not so good?
Mm, every few months, I've been thinking about trauma for almost 2 years now, trying to understand it. Um, and that's an interesting story in itself, because in a doctor's life, they start off thinking about trauma from the purely physical sense. So in residency, when I was 23, 24, I entered into medical residency. The word trauma only meant road traffic accident. So,
Yeah.
you get a call कि trauma का patient आया है. मतलब road traffic accident का patient आया है. Or maximum, there may be some family abuse, somebody hitting each other, some local gang fight, something, but it's always physical. So the word trauma always meant a physical injury. And
Right.
then as you read more and more about mental health and all, you realize that trauma could also mean a mental injury. That's the first step. You take one step further into understanding what trauma means. And you think about trauma from the perspective of post-traumatic stress disorder.
Right.
That something so horrible happened to you that now you are in shock. You can't move, you can't function. You are, in fact, a psychiatric patient.
Mm.
And then your understanding of trauma grows, and you realize that not all trauma needs to leave such a visible impact where they come to you for treatment or they
Right.
come to a psychiatrist for treatment. Trauma can leave more subtle impacts. Trauma doesn't have to make you dysfunctional. Trauma can still leave you functional, but
Mm.
you are functioning despite the trauma. So
Right.
you are braving through it. And then you go to a deeper understanding of trauma where you realize that trauma might not just leave you functional, it might actually make you stronger. So those who have suffered through trauma and overcome it can actually be better off than those who have not suffered trauma at all.
Right.
Now your understanding of trauma, it grows even more, because now you've always thought of trauma as a bad thing. But then you feel that, wait, so is it good that those guys went through trauma? And then you understand that the very definition of trauma is subjective.
Right.
What is trauma to one person may not be trauma to another, because trauma is a retrospective diagnosis. So just like in the physical sense, if I punch a kid and that same force in that same place can break his arm, but if I punch a friend, he might just take it as a friendly gesture. Trauma is very subjective. It's not the incident itself that is traumatic. It is how our brain perceives that incident.
Right.
So nobody can, that's why I spoke about this with even Disha, that nobody can compare trauma, because it
Right.
is extremely subjective to you in that place, in that time. How traumatic something is to you is subjective to you. So how your brain deals with it then decides how you grow or how you are traumatized.
Right.
So there's
And
no,
does
yeah.
that mean that we as well are responsible for how we conduct ourselves around people because we could somehow be responsible for their trauma?
Um, Now here's a very heavy loaded question, actually. I would definitely suggest that you are right. We have to be aware that the things that we do and say can be traumatic to someone.
Right.
That being said, anything can be traumatic in that particular circumstance.
Right.
So, that is the positive and negative of trigger warnings, because we cannot know what is triggering to someone. So we cannot possibly keep thinking about, well, is this traumatic? Is this traumatic? Is this traumatic? There are some topics which are at a greater risk of being traumatizing or being triggering. So there we have to be a bit more careful. But I think the most important thing is intent. Are you intending to harm them? And awareness that if you have hurt somebody or triggered somebody or traumatized somebody, can you then fix it? Can you heal? Can you apologize?
Right.
For me, I think these two are the most important things.
Your intention and whether you can apologize once you realize it.
You have the insight to be aware that, oh, I said this and this has been the effect, because you cannot predict the effect of everything you say on everyone you meet.
Right.
Yeah.
That absolutely makes sense. And
When you read the book, Your Body Keeps Score, what was your understanding of trauma?
I'm still reading it, but trauma, of course, like after having read quite a bit about it, I've realized it's just not physical, like you said, it's also mental. And there's another book, School of Life, which we talk about a lot on the channel. And
Yes, someone just mentioned it on the chat.
yes, okay. But yeah, the School of Life is absolutely beautiful. And it actually talks to you about how, in fact, the way your parents dealt with you, it's a YouTube channel as well, but how your parents dealt with you, what your circumstances were while growing up, also shape your personality, also shape the kind of individual you become. And that governs the kind of traumas you have in life.
Yeah,
For
100%.
example, I don't know if it's actually, but there's this book called Attachment. There you talk about the way people attach themselves. Some are anxious, avoidance, etc., etc. I know I'm an avoidant, and perhaps that goes back to how my parents dealt with me. But it's just trauma is, I know, like we've always spoken. So I did karate when I was growing up, and we always spoke about the injuries that you can see. It's good as long as you can see your injuries, but once there is an injury that you don't know of, it's riskier. So the trauma that's inside is riskier because not everyone will understand what you're going through, because they cannot see pain. Like, where is this pain? They do not
Yeah.
know how to measure it.
So one trauma that all parents will invariably leave their kids is the one of love, which is very ironic. We are the truth of life is that we are alone. Essentially, we are alone, and we are surrounded by other people who are also alone,
Right.
and we have a social contract with them to take care of each other. And
Right.
that social contract varies. The contract between our parents is different. The contract between you and your mom, you and your dad, you and your siblings, you and your life partner, you and your best friends, you and your dog. The contract, the social contract between us and the people around us is different. But essentially, they're contracts. They can be broken.
Right.
So the only person who is truly responsible for dealing with your trauma is yourself. And
Absolutely.
everyone who comes to help you is a bonus.
Right.
This is the way that I see it.
Yeah.
And one of the advantages that I have always experienced is gratitude for every single person who has ever helped me deal with anything. I have this overwhelming sense of gratitude because I know that they don't have to. Right?
Right.
Because that's the way that trauma works. It is essentially your burden to bear and your burden to solve. And to be very honest, the pleasure that you get when you solve your own trauma is it can't be compared,
Right.
because you know that you understand yourself better. So you
Absolutely.
know how to deal with it a little better. So that's the trauma of love, because if your parents shower you with love, they can sometimes make you forget that
Yeah.
you are responsible for your own trauma.
Right. So there's a running joke that I make, life is good as long as you go home for 4 days. On the fifth day, that's when you realize I'm happy when I'm away.
Yeah.
But that's just it. But then in Disha's stream, I also heard you talk about, how you are a different person in the morning. And then as the day proceeds, you become a different person. And that's another thing. Like, so do you genuinely believe that there are a lot of personalities that make an individual? Um,
I,
so I have a habit of sometimes addressing myself as us, but that's a joke because of how
all the voices in
moody
your
a
head.
person can be. Yeah, and all the voices in your head. But is it true, like there can be different personalities inside your head,
Yeah.
all of
Then
you working to it together to ensure that there is a sane future?
tell me this. I'm gonna go about this in a tangent. Like when you were growing up, did you have an alternate personality, like another Vani, who had slightly similar but also slightly different ways of talking to people and likes and dislikes? Did you have that?
Yeah, like I wouldn't have different likes and dislikes, but yes, there is always a different personality that comes out in front of some people, or yeah.
Right, right. So I feel that we literally create different versions of ourselves as a way of trial and error. Sometimes we do it consciously, sometimes we don't really know that we are doing this, but we do have different expectations from ourselves at different times.
Right.
And earlier I used to think that this was very hypocritical.
Okay.
How can you have one set of moral ethics at one point, and you expect
Mm.
certain things from yourself, but then I realized that the concept of hypocrisy itself is hypocritical, and we all of us do this. All of us have multiple personalities, and now I know why. Because identity is itself a story that you've created. So imagine that there is one guy sitting at the top of a building, and his job is to project, like transmit out information that comes from all the floors of the building.
Right.
Okay. So if all the floors are giving information to the top floor, then that guy will transmit everything. And that becomes your identity. But
Right.
suppose if half of the floors don't have electricity, then only half the floors are transmitting up. And so only half of that information goes out. So it'll seem like a different person. So for me, that's how the brain is structured.
Got
So
it.
you have the spinal cord, you have the brainstem, you have the limbic system, you have the prefrontal cortex, and different parts of the brain have different agendas. So there's
Right.
one part of the brain that just wants you to breathe and keep your heart beating and wants you to eat and poop. That's it. That's what that part of the brain is concerned with.
Right.
There's another part of the brain that wants you to survive and also find a partner and have lots of kids. That's what that part of the brain is concerned with. And as you keep going higher up, the what the brain is concerned with keeps changing.
Right.
So you are the sum product of all of these parts. So depending on whichever part is transmitting loudest, you are a different person.
And that's how your personality or your behavior changes.
Yep.
Nice. I think I can make peace with all the 365 personalities in my head now.
Oh, there you go. I mean, it's all one big happy family.
Yeah. An extremely huge family. But tell me one thing, like, does it help? So every time there's a problem, I read about it, I do massive research. Now, considering you know so well and you're so well read in this particular field, does it help that you know sometimes why you're behaving a certain way? Perhaps my dopamine is less, or maybe I need more dopamine. So maybe I'll just do this and this will help. Does it always help, or does it come with, oh, I know this despite that I'm doing this? What an idiot.
Oh wow. That hit too close to home for comfort. Because that's actually what happens.
Right.
To be very honest, knowledge doesn't preclude stupidity. So just because I know doesn't mean that I'm not stupid anymore. Because the part of me that does stupid things is actually not the part of me that knows all this.
Right.
So, and that's the ironic thing. My prefrontal cortex knows that, listen, you are just being angry because you are being threatened by something that is actually not threatening you. But that doesn't mean that my limbic system doesn't get angry.
Right.
So even as I'm lashing out, a part of me knows that, all right, this is unnecessary. So probably the difference would be that I stop doing it much quicker. So if I have to express something, I'll express it, but then I come back to the baseline a little quicker than I would have otherwise if I didn't know it. But I still experience all of it, the full up and down of human emotions.
That's good to know.
It is.
Otherwise, you imagine that the other person, because they know it, they'll have massive control, and I must also read and read and read more.
No. And I'll tell you one thing. Very recently, I've started thinking about how maybe it is the limbic system and the emotions that makes it all worth it.
Right.
I mean, you could be very logical and rational all day long, but then if you and I are having an absolutely rational discussion, assuming that we have a similar level of knowledge, we might end up being very identical to each other. Because rationality decides a very specific kind of behavior.
Right.
And it will be rational for us to behave in a particular way. And so I am starting to believe that for identity, emotions and the limbic system is extremely important. So it's not really, limbic is not the enemy. Emotions are not the enemy. So I've stopped thinking that you shouldn't feel anything or you shouldn't experience emotions at all. Like that is never the point. I think you should experience everything. Just be aware. That's all.
Right. And then I also read this in the books that we were talking about, that, the more people try to hide their trauma, the more they have repressed trauma, it can convert into illnesses. But, sometimes when we try to resolve our trauma, we just end up traumatizing other people. And so, like, how do you resolve it in a way that, it doesn't create a sparkle that will harm anybody?
Every now and then, I get asked a question in a particular way, which makes it sound like the questioner is remembering things from their own life. And it's just the way that words are used. It's just right. And I would have loved to know, okay, what made you ask this?
I was just, it's like sometimes you just think. So when I was reading the book, I was like, hey, because sometimes when I'm very angry, I don't
Mhm.
really express it. And I'm like, hey, I'll just come back to it. And by, when I'm calm and relaxed. But
Sure.
I don't want to hurt the other person. I don't want to hurt the other person because I know I'll regret saying what I have to.
Exactly. Yeah.
And so I come back, but then the anger is still there. I'm calm and composed, but the anger is still there. And then
Yeah.
I'm like, hey, when I was reading the book, I was like, hey, is it going to convert it into a tumor or something of sorts when I grow old or what? So I'm just
No.
like, this just was one of the things that came to my head.
No, so there are certain things that suppressed emotions can do, which is um, basically unresolved issues or unresolved conflicts uh, are threats that you carry around. It's like a little time bomb that is there in your house, and you can't sleep properly, right? If there is a time bomb in your house, you're always worried.
Right.
So it's a bit like that. So unresolved issues are or unresolved conflicts. I think the word conflict is extremely important when we work our way through trauma. We have to understand where the conflict lies, because there's always a conflict. There are two opposing belief systems that are in clash,
Hmm.
and a threat is our brain being unable to resolve that conflict. So if you resolve that conflict, the threat goes away. But because that conflict is there are so many variables, or it's too complicated, so you're not able to resolve it. So that threat remains. And
Right.
as long as the threat remains, your sympathetic system is active, which is your primitive monkey brain thinking that there's something, there is a danger inside the house.
Got it.
It's like there's a wild animal in the house. In my own safe zone, there's a wild animal and it can come and attack me anytime. So you're never fully relaxed.
Right.
And that can have long-term effects. So chronic sympathetic system activation leads to chronic overstimulation of cortisol, and that can lead to chronic stress. And chronic stress has a whole book full of effects,
Right.
from anxiety to depression to insomnia to fibromyalgia to chronic fatigue syndrome, a lot of stuff. Just chronic stress can increase the chances of migraine, heart attack, all sorts of stuff. It doesn't cause it, but it increases the risk.
So I think the solution is to resolve all your conflicts.
Ideally, yes. I don't think it's actually possible. You can't
Right.
resolve all your conflicts, because you can keep going deeper and deeper. You can solve superficial conflicts, but then there is another underlying layer of conflict, and then there's an underlying layer of, with the most deepest layer of conflict of all being purpose of life and our relationship with death.
Right.
That is a conflict that I'm not really sure we can ever truly resolve, because it's so inherent. I mean, it's so inherent to literally every cell in our body that resolving that conflict is, I mean, I think it'll make you superhuman, because it's just too inherent to who we are.
Right. There's also this question that Siddarth is asking you.
Mhm.
Does the brain really respond to changing its state like alpha, gamma, etc., when one tries to induce it through external means?
So when you say changing its state like alpha, gamma, I'm assuming you're talking about frequency of brain waves. So the alpha frequency and the beta and the gamma frequency are the rate at which your neuronal, like, electrical activity in your brain is going. So alpha is like the baseline resting state. And then as you start focusing on something, it becomes beta. And then your periods of uh, focused attention is gamma frequency, but then you can't sustain it for too long. So then it'll switch back to beta and alpha. And then when you are sleeping, it goes below. It dips below alpha. So it goes down to theta and then delta. So that is the range of human attention. So you cannot remain in one particular frequency for too long because that's not how the brain is wired. You have to keep going up and down, up and down. So it definitely does respond to the environment. In fact, it only responds to the environment. Our brain is cued to respond to sunlight, uh, food, availability of food, external temperature. All of those things affect our brain's attention level.
Right.
Yeah.
And moving past that, I just want to get back to the books that we had started discussing.
Yeah, Kitaabi Cabins, come on, yes.
Because what other things have you been reading?
So I have been reading, wait, I'll show you some interesting books, okay?
Yeah.
Tell me if you've read this. This is called as The Design of Everyday Things.
I
Okay.
haven't read this, but yes.
It's a delightful book. It's by an author called Don Norman. And I read this like 2 years ago, and I've recently started reading it again. I really like it because it talks about the beauty of design.
Oh.
So I've been thinking about the word design. What does that mean? We look at a particular object, like for example, an iPhone or a tablet or a laptop or a car, and the design, the way that car is designed, will decide how our experience is. And the book talks about how every design affects our life. So a good designed object will make our life better. A badly designed object will make our life worse. It would have been better if that object was not there in our life.
Yes.
Right? So the design of things is so important. And the overarching meta of it is that even non-physical things have design, like relationships.
Yeah.
So we get into a relationship without really thinking about what can make us comfortable. And we sort of design a relationship subconsciously. But it is technically possible to design a relationship in a way that makes things comfortable for us, for who you are as a person, as opposed to you changing yourself completely to fit into a relationship. Because it's you came first, not the relationship.
Oh, absolutely.
So I've really started enjoying this way of thinking, even in terms of scheduling. So if you look at your day is made up of a lot of constituent products, like half-hour slots, 1 hour slots. Now you can arrange those slots in a particular way so that you can design your day to be really good for you.
Right.
But only if you think about it. You have to think about it like you're designing something. And it makes all the difference in the world. So it's something that I've recently started experimenting with myself, like designing my room, designing my table. Everything is designed. Designing my notability notes.
Yeah.
Give a few minutes of thought into how will you design this, and then do it. So it just makes it more mindful.
So this reminds me of this book by the same guy who wrote The School of Life, Alan de Botton. It's
Oh,
called
yeah.
The Architecture of Happiness.
I've
And
seen the video on that, yeah.
yes, and the book just talks about how any beautiful thing will promise you happiness. Not beauty as in beauty, but like the way it's designed. It will promise you happiness if it's done well.
Yeah, it's an uplifting thought, actually.
Yeah.
And it's always nice to know that simple things can give you as much and more that you want. You don't have to chase complexity.
Right.
We think that complex things or hard to get things will make us happier, but it's really not that. In fact, the simpler the better.
Right. I was actually there was this reel that Varun Dugirala posted today. I think it's him only, but he spoke about how sometimes we're chasing the larger things and we forget about the small things that bring us joy. And that is such a nice thought, because that is what we do in everyday lives, because we are chasing something, we're chasing a bonus, we're chasing another milestone. We forget about the small things that bring us joy, and then one day we wake up and we realize that's just out of our routine. We don't listen to that particular band anymore, that song anymore.
Yeah. Um, I always think about it in terms of if you're building a structure, the basement is the most important thing. So again, when we talk of design, we want to live on the 42nd floor of a sky rise. We want a penthouse on the 42nd floor.
Yeah.
And for some reason, somehow, stupidly, we directly start constructing the 42nd floor.
Yeah.
And, if you take the metaphor to an actual building, instinctively that's not possible. And you
Right.
also know that you can't just put up 4 pillars and build a 42nd floor building. Like, you need to build.
Yeah.
So you have to get there.
Right.
And the basement is the most important thing. So put in maximum effort in the basements of your life, get that sorted. And it's amazing how quickly you can rise after that.
Would you blame the age of instant gratification for this? Because we just get everything today very easily. And then the whole process of waiting for the end result just tires us out.
I would actually. Um, I absolutely would, because we are not wired to get anything this easily. We are not. So, for example, right now, for me to get a piece of cake, it's literally just a swipe.
Yeah.
Just a swipe, and then in 20 minutes, somebody will deliver it to my house. In
Yeah.
5 years, there'll be a drone that delivers it to my room, I'm sure. And so that I don't even have to get up and go to the door.
Right.
So it is becoming easier and easier for us to be gratified. And so the responsibility of austerity comes on us. Earlier, that was taken up by the environment. So hardship was provided by the environment, pleasure was brought about by us. But that equation of austerity to pleasure or austerity to reward has to be maintained. So if the environment is not providing enough challenges, you need to supply it. Because reward to hai.
Yeah.
Reward jab chahiye milega. So you need to gamify it yourself now. That I will order from Swiggy if I've whatever, done 100 push-ups, whatever, something, add an element of hardship to every reward that you get because it's good for you.
Right. That's actually a great solution. Yeah.
Absolutely. So, you can get that Swiggy whenever. Like, there is literally nothing stopping you from doing that.
Yeah.
Except you need to stop yourself and you need to create that challenge. You need to put in some kind of obstacle, because now the lack of obstacle is the main obstacle. It's a problem. It's actually a problem. So yeah, we have to.
And I think our relationships and eventually long-term goals pay the price for it.
Explain. What do you mean?
Because we want instant gratification. If something doesn't go our way, we're like quick to dismiss it. It's not working because it's incorrect. And I think our patience is lost somewhere in that process.
So I've been very curious to, I have never been on dating apps. So on Tinder or, any of them. But I have always been very curious to try and understand how that has impacted relationships. At a generational level, the idea of meeting and breaking up with people at such a frequency, always knowing that there are 7 others, 8 others on my DM list right now that I could meet at any point, and always wondering if that person would be better than this person. Um, Never before in our lives have we had so many options.
True.
Um, and I know for a fact that love, I'll put it in air quotes because it's absolutely an abstract concept, but love is something that kind of grows over time. And if you're not giving that time, I'm curious as to how modern day relationships have been affected because of dating apps.
I haven't been on a dating app, but I believe like your pool of people and options increases. But then
Mhm.
again, are you able to develop the kind of relationships that, say, for example, your parents have had? Because
Mm.
they've invested in the relationship, they've added fertilizer and manure and whatever. But
Yeah,
they've kind of learned from it and they've grown together through it because they've seen so many ups and downs together.
yeah,
I think they've come out stronger. But then, we call it the Tinder generation. If you're just leaving because, hey, the person said, I'm not going to wear pink, just an example, but whatever, it's just, I think you don't get to learn a lot from that. And in life, I think when we look at partners, we want somebody who's going to be there, who's going to be reliable and offers challenges, not
yeah,
in every aspect of life, but certain intellectual challenges, perhaps.
yeah.
And I don't think if you have a backup of sorts, you're going to give your 100% to thing. And
Mm.
I feel very old as I say this, but like, I,
I
is that
like it.
even worth it? Is that relationship even worth it if you already have a backup?
Yeah, I
I
was.
feel like I'm 80 and I've aged.
Yeah, you're like one sentence away from देखो हमारे जमाने में ऐसा सब नहीं था.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I was reading about I don't know why I was reading about mythological stories from Ramayana.
Yeah.
Something I was having some conversation with a friend, and I was reading about Sita's Swayamvar. Okay, and how the Swayamvar was about Ram had to lift that bow and use it because Sita had put that claim that she was able to do it.
Right.
She was able to lift that bow, and so she wanted to marry somebody who was also capable of matching up to her or beating her, so that it provides some kind of challenge.
Hmm.
And I remember thinking that wait, so that's not very different from swiping right on Tinder, because you
Speed
are
dating.
making it is speed dating, exactly.
Yeah.
You are making a spot decision based
Yeah.
on one variable.
True. And what if you realize that, I don't know, I swiped right because, hey, I loved his hairstyle. But then the moment I went and I just don't.
Exactly. I mean, sure, he lifted a
It is
bow,
scary.
but he had commitment issues. I mean, I don't know.
Not
Or he didn't like
like
dogs.
but yeah, I mean, I just think it's very scary. What if it turns out to be just another psychopath?
Psychopaths are scary. Sociopaths can be fun. Psychopaths are scary.
I'm not sure I'm capable or equipped enough to deal with sociopaths. I'm scared of both the categories.
Yeah, yeah. No, so that was said absolutely in jest. I mean, both are both are not really recommended. Um, the the problem again would be that some elements of sociopathy do exist in almost everyone in some way or the other, like a bit of narcissism, uh, self-obsession, jealousy. There will be different traits that are
Yeah.
there, and the combination of all these traits is what makes an individual. Nobody can be 0, 0, 0, 0 in all negative traits and 100, 100, 100 on all positive traits. That doesn't happen.
Yeah.
um, but the amount of these negative traits in comparison to the positive traits, and most importantly, how much they are aware of it and how
Mm.
willing they are to work on it, is for me the only variable. I mean, honestly, it's just if
Yeah.
somebody is self-aware and capable of change, things are sorted.
Yeah.
because otherwise who they are right now is depends on the trauma that they've had before. But from now, you could be the trauma that affects them.
Yeah.
So, yay.
But it's just, like how, so one of my grandparents got married because of the newspaper matrimonial. So even though I'm from Himachal, my grandmother is from Delhi or somewhere. And it's kind of interesting because on Tinder, that's just possible every day. That's just every possible match. And that's the only interesting thing about it. But then where do you stop? How do you know this? So, Dear Zindagi, Shah Rukh Khan taught you really well, like try the sofas, try all the sofas in the market, and you'll know which sofa is for you. But then where do you stop? Where do you stop wishing like, hey, I wish I had a recliner now? Once you get the recliner, you're like, hey, I wish it were a massage chair. So where do you stop?
Yeah, you don't. At some point, you just have to say that this is the recliner for me, and I will not try any other recliner ever again in my life.
I'm going to be committed to this recliner. It's a very, yeah.
Or no, there are many ways. No, so there are many ways of living. I don't think that any one particular lifestyle is right and wrong. It completely depends on you and the recliner.
Yeah, if it works for you, great. You can shop every day at the furniture.
Absolutely. What are you reading now?
I'm actually reading the book for the month as well, which is Lust for Life. It is the biography of Vincent van Gogh.
Van Gogh?
Yes.
Oh, lovely.
So it's kind of really nice. Stone has written it. And this is also the book for the month. It's such a nice and clever plug. I'm proud of it. But we do this a book a month every month on Kitaabi Cabins now and Chalchitra Talks, where together as a community we read one book together. And this month we've picked up Lust for Life.
Super. And it's about his life story?
Yes, it's about his life. It's a fictionalized version of how his life was. The poverty, the art, the excellence, and yes,
so
most of it.
There's an interesting parameter to read it from, because I don't think I'll be able to join in this month to read it. But since we've been talking about trauma, it's a very interesting angle of the importance of trauma in art.
Right.
So if when you're reading this book, I would love it if you keep that parameter also in your mind. And I would love to hear about it from you later.
Definitely.
In Van Gogh's life, because he's somebody, I remember going to his museum in Amsterdam, and that was, I spent a couple of days just reading about his life, and so that I could appreciate all his work better. And I remember being very impressed by the amount of trauma that he has gone through. I'm not saying that that is necessary to create that kind of art, but it has definitely had an impact. And I'm just curious.
I think he's the poster boy for what we call the tragic artist, where you think that, tragedy isn't like "Toote dil se hi sangeet nikalta hai." But it's really nice.
Okay, I will be looking forward to hearing from you on this.
There's also this rumor. So there was this beautiful post when I think I was in school when I saw that post. And it was about how Van Gogh swallowed the color yellow to make the insides look beautiful, which was very jarring because it was, of course, scary, but it's also a lie. But then still this post would go on about how somebody thought that swallowing the color yellow would just make their insides kind of pretty. And that's another sort of trauma, which a lot of people would just dismiss.
Right.
And I dismissed it then because I thought it was stupid. But now as I grow older, I'm like, hey, this is very much possible.
Beautiful thought. Yeah. I remember being obsessed with Picasso to the point where I spent almost 3 to 4 months reading about him. And he actually went through color phases. So if you look at Picasso's work, he went through a blue phase. He went through a red phase.
Wow.
where everything he saw was from the perspective of that color. And as a as somebody who's not an artist of that level, I am fascinated by how a human brain, because his brain is just like ours, right? But then he has pushed his ideas of normality and how a human being should behave to the absolute extreme, where living like this was okay.
Yeah.
And I somehow feel that the one thing that holds art back is fear. We are always afraid of what we will think, what other people will think. And so we hold ourselves back. And so we don't even allow ourselves the space to explore ideas, what ideas can mix.
Right.
But when I read about people like this, I think it's just beautiful that some of us have done that. Some humans have done that.
Right. I think we're also somewhere afraid of the commitment that it will involve. I mean,
Yeah.
sometimes I am afraid of the commitment it takes to, you know, just be on that level of brilliance.
Yeah. Because you're not really sure if there's a way back.
You're not sure. Yes.
Maybe there isn't.
Yeah.
And if you are, and I've been reading about attachment styles myself recently in the last 2 weeks, about anxious and avoidant basically. And I also fit into the avoidant style more, although it's not a complete fit, but definitely more things speak out to me from the avoidant style.
Right.
And I feel that that is also not a great idea for an artist, because while you need detachment to create, I feel that you need complete immersion to feel.
Yeah.
And so, like I am a logical creator, uh,
Hmm.
but then art which has seen art which has gone through passion, you can feel it. Like the
Yeah.
people who see that art or hear that art knows that this is an art that has come through passion, and that is different from art that has come through logic.
True. Absolutely.
Yes,
It's
something.
yeah. But what are the other books that you've been reading?
I love that you keep coming back. All right, cool. I'm just going to take you through them. Okay, so I've collected these books that I've been kind of reading on and off in the last few months. I showed you this one. So this is the book called At the Existentialist Cafe.
Wow, I like how we're picking up one book and there are just so many threads coming out of it.
I know. So I've been very keen on existentialism. I've been reading a lot about it,
Yeah.
because of all the philosophies. It's funny. It's like earlier, when I was a kid, I used to think that I need to find what my philosophy fits in with, and then I
Right.
realized that as we grow, we go through all philosophies.
True.
I was a nihilist at one point, and then a stoic at another point. So let's be honest. So this is at the
Yeah.
Existentialist Cafe. It talks a lot about existentialism.
Yeah. And
Have
then
you
you
read it?
find the perfect balance. I haven't read it, but I've been meaning to pick this up.
Yeah, it's a delightful book. This I actually finished Daily Stoic.
Oh, nice.
This is about stoicism. It is. I remember tweeting about this or sharing a story about it. Honestly, I don't think Indians need to read this. I think
Apparently.
this is yeah. I think this is a concept for the West, and we can read it, sure, but I feel that Stoicism somewhere is ingrained in our culture. The idea of sab moh maya hai
Mm.
essentially is Stoicism.
Right.
So we have that in our culture, we have that in our blood. We've grown up with it. We can forget it sometimes. We tend to forget it, so it'll be good to remember it. But I mean, there's nothing in here that the Bhagavad Gita doesn't talk about. So
It's just a good reminder, nothing
it's a
else.
good reminder. It's an easy book to carry around. This book I've finished before. I'm reading it again. This is called as the Book of Five Rings. I don't remember if I talked about this book with Vaibhav because it's been on my shelf since then. But this is about Japanese art of sword fighting,
Wow. This
and
is
it's brilliant because he talks about sword fighting, except he's not talking about sword fighting. He's talking about life,
okay.
and he talks about attack, defense, movement, the importance of breathing, the importance of knowing your own style of fighting. Because he says that whether you have a sword in your hand or not, every one of us is a sword fighter, except that we are different styles of sword fighters. So
Right.
if you hold a sword, the way you fight will be different from the way I fight. But then if I don't know my own style, I might try to copy you, and that'll never work.
True. And that'll just be exhausting.
It'll be exhausting and I'll probably get killed. So this is very similar to jitsu.
Okay.
The style of jitsu is also, it also talks about it very similarly. Like everybody has a different style of jitsu, and the
Mm.
whole journey of learning jitsu is to basically find out how you move.
Right.
What are your advantages? What are your disadvantages? So
Right.
I can't fight like a 300-pound, sumo wrestler, because he has a different set of strengths than me. But that doesn't mean that I can't beat him if I play to my strengths. So whatever that is. So I really love this book, absolutely. And this is the last one. This is a very, unexpected one. This is the Carnatic music book.
Wow. And you've been reading it. Are
I
you
have,
also trained in music?
yeah, I've been practicing it. So these are all the lessons that, so I was trained in Carnatic music when I was a kid, but I've been practicing this for the guitar.
Oh, nice.
So
Is it
basically,
somewhat like music theory?
absolutely, yeah. It's
Okay.
music. So it's different ragas and different rhythms. Except I'm just trying to practice it on the guitar so that A, I'll just revise my music theory, and B, thoda guitar ka practice ho jayega.
Nice. And would you recommend it to fellow? So it's in.
No, not this book really, because I just picked this up because it's something that I'm familiar with. Uh,
Okay.
I grew up learning classical Carnatic music when I was a kid. My mom is a Carnatic music teacher.
Nice.
So this is something that I'm familiar with. Otherwise, I think there are better resources on YouTube to learn guitar
Yeah.
theory.
But I remember like recently, I also, not recently, last year during a pandemic when we had the lockdown, I
Mhm.
went back to Kathak and I picked up again, but I suck at it. That's something else. That's another story.
Come
But
on.
I started reading the literature again. And then after some time, I was like, maybe I should just go back to YouTube.
Oh no. But it's fascinating though. What did you like about the literature of Kathak?
So I never liked Kathak. My mother pushed me into it.
Fair.
I wanted
Trauma,
to join karate classes, which were like just opposite on the next terrace.
right?
That's where it started.
I see your trauma. I see you.
Yeah, but no. What I really liked about Kathak was the history, and that
Yeah,
is where it stopped because I just wasn't ready to put in all the hard work that's required.
yeah, yeah. Makes sense. Makes sense. Is it something that you're still pursuing, karate?
No, not actively.
Not actively.
Yeah,
All right. Interesting. Because I think in any kind of movement exercise, and this is just a theory that I have, that all of us needs to find one movement that we like doing.
yeah,
It doesn't really matter what.
right,
Whether it's dance or Zumba or football or karate or swimming or whatever, but one kind of, there has to be some purpose of movement for
right,
its own sake. Like our purpose of movement cannot be just to go to work.
right.
It we need to get fit so that we can move for one reason. You just need one, but
Yeah,
that one reason we all have to find.
right.
Yeah.
This is very interesting because I had a last month, I was reading this book and I had a thought like how important rhythm is to your life.
Mm.
And in fact, it exists between people. The moment
Yeah.
you catch the rhythm, you can define whether this relationship is going to go well or whether you're going to end up breaking each other's heads or whether, in fact, the rhythm of life. There are some people who just walk and there is a certain grace. And you're
Yeah.
just like, hey, there's something about this individual.
Yeah.
And then there are certain people who are just very stiff. They haven't found the rhythm in life. And it just shows in the way they walk around. And I think, like, similar to how you said, there is a movement that we should find. I believe there is a particular rhythm that you need to figure out for yourself.
Absolutely. I love the word grace in this context, because grace essentially means that one component of movement, how comfortably does it link with the next component of movement?
Right.
So there is grace in dance, like that's where you think of grace the most. So if somebody's an awkward dancer, it just means that even if they are doing the same set of movements as somebody else, each movement isn't linked to the next one in a fluid way. So it just feels very, robotic. Whereas a graceful dancer will make every single movement feel like one flow,
Yeah,
and it's pleasing to watch.
it is.
Um, but then I realized that grace isn't limited just to dance. It's also limited to, like you said, body movement. Somebody can walk gracefully. Somebody can talk gracefully. And
Right.
there is grace also in thinking.
Hmm.
So I've
And
started noticing
yeah,
that recently. Like somebody's a graceful thinker.
right. And I think it comes in when you've identified the kind of movement or the kind of pace that you want to walk in or just
Mm.
flow in. And I think that comes with a lot of experiences and wisdom.
Yeah. People are afraid to pause,
Yeah.
in conversations, in a room. They fear their narrative will be taken away from them.
Hmm.
So I have started noticing the length of pauses that somebody makes in a conversation.
Yeah.
I feel like it reflects their level of anxiety, that then the narrative will get taken away.
I feel the need to ask you, how anxious do you think I have been throughout this conversation?
At all. Not at all. That's a double-edged question, because if you're anxious, then that means that I haven't made you comfortable enough.
Oh, that's
That's
a
not fair.
true. There's Nikhil in the channel. He said this is a personal attack.
Lots of questions in this conversation have been personal.
Right. But
Sanju,
this is actually very nice, because I remember Vaibhav and I were having this conversation of last year about how long of a pause can you give the other person, especially when you're on Zoom call, so that it doesn't get awkward. Uh, because sometimes you just ask the question and the person is thinking and you want to make them comfortable. Like,
yeah,
hey, this is a question that I'm asking you. And the person is busy thinking. Now, you don't want to interrupt their thoughts, but then you also don't want to just leave the audience there because they'll
yeah.
drop off. So do you give them the space, or do you just go like, hey, koi baat nahi, let's move on?
If it's a live stream, then you have different priorities. You can't avoid that unless our chat is extremely understanding and they know both of you very well. Like, हाँ ठीक है, तू बैठ, मैं भी बैठा हूँ, कोई. But if
Right.
you're entertaining a crowd, I think there is a certain level of responsibility that you also have to the audience. Because if you're just going to pretend that it's just the two of you, then we might as well have recorded offline. You know,
Right.
we want to do a live stream for a reason, because we want to involve the people who are listening, who are taking out their time on a Monday night. So that's a beautiful thing.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely a beautiful thing. So um, it's because then it's a three-way relationship. It's a three-way conversation. It's
Hmm.
not just one person pausing and one person listening. If chat is as comfortable pausing for that long as you are, you're good. You're okay.
Right.
But if chat is uncomfortable, then you have a responsibility to both of them,
Hmm.
your guest and the audience. So then you talk to the audience.
Right.
It comes on the guest to understand that, okay, she's not interrupting me, but she's making sure that the third part of this conversation, the third person in this conversation is also comfortable. That's how I look at it.
It's actually a very relaxing thought. And but what do you think of so there's this one thing that I really struggle with, and this really pisses me off in conversations, when I realize, the moment I realize the other person is a bad listener.
Mhm.
And how do you deal with that when you realize you're speaking with somebody, but the other person is just either looking forward to the next question or is just not paying attention or is just passively listening to you because perhaps their entire what do you call it? Attention is on something else.
Mm.
And it's just not about YouTube conversations. It's just could something be in your normal everyday
Realize.
life.
Mm.
And for some reason, over the past few weeks, I've just been noticing bad listeners, nothing else. And I think there's some, yeah.
Well, first of all, um, if somebody is a bad listener, it's their loss. It's like you can't. That's where I start with, because you have to feel that having a conversation with you is a privilege.
Right.
You have to feel that. I feel that having a conversation with me is a privilege for anyone, and nothing wrong in that. And I expect that the person that I'm talking to should also feel that me getting to talk to them is a privilege for me. And if you have that feeling of mutual privilege, you will tend to pay attention and give them the focus that they deserve. Of course, with best friends is different. You could be very distracted because then you can take them for granted, and that's fine. Because then you will sort it out. But then, especially at the start of a relationship, at the start of a friendship, I think it's extremely important that you be clear in your head that is this a privilege or not. And if it is, then everything else just falls into place. And if somebody is making you feel that speaking with you is not really a privilege for them, then that's fine. Like it'll just affect your future decision making about them. And nothing wrong with that.
That's nice. May I ask you a personal question?
Oh, more personal than all. Oh,
Oh,
I'm just
like,
go
how
on.
woke would you call yourself?
It's been a roller coaster actually.
Right.
Because I've struggled with understanding certain concepts when I was growing up, and then I understood a lot of it, and I was very vocal in a lot of it. But now, more and more, I'm also understanding why the conservative line of thinking is having so much trouble coming to terms with things. Because I feel that empathy goes both ways. And I'm becoming more and more aware of the lack of empathy on the woke on the woke side of conversation towards people who don't understand. Um, I feel that rejecting or making anybody feel completely disrespected for not understanding is exactly the crime that you are accusing them of doing.
Hmm.
So, and I think it's counterproductive, because if humanity has to move forward, then we all have to get it. We can't just have 50 people who are extremely woke and everybody else is cancelled.
Right.
Okay, now what? I mean, now what? What do we do? It's a stalemate, or it's not a stalemate. In fact, it'll be counterproductive. In fact,
Absolutely.
it'll be harmful. It will actually be detrimental to your interests, because the backlash will make it far worse than what it has been. So I'm feeling more and more convinced that the conversation needs to reach out and find different words to talk about it.
Do you think then wokeness is very subjective?
Wokeness comes out of empathy, in terms of there's a certain group of people who have been underprivileged and who have been ignored, whether that's because of their gender, that's because of their sexuality, whether that's because of their political beliefs, their religious beliefs, whatever it is, there is a certain sect of people who have been disadvantaged, right? That's where it starts from. And so it comes upon the majority to give them that privilege, give them respect, basically. Like that's the crux of it. You need a respect, you need to validate them. You can't tell them that your existence isn't valid. Whatever is your sexuality, whatever is your gender, whatever is your political religious belief, whatever, it's fine. You're not invalid because of that one thing. And that I completely get. But if you are saying that if somebody does not validate them immediately and in the exact way that you want them to validate them, then you are going to invalidate those guys. It makes the full discussion counterproductive, because it's like somebody protesting against murder, and if somebody else doesn't agree, then you shoot them.
Sure.
It's illogical. So I think the conversation definitely needs to take a step back and sort of go at it again using different words.
Yeah. This is actually a very nice thought, and I had never thought of it, how wokeness is just directly proportional to empathy. It's all about
that's where it started from, right?
Yeah.
That's where it started from. But then, like everything in human nature, it can be taken too far. Everything, like literally everything, every single good thing that has ever existed can be taken too far. There is no such thing that cannot be taken too far. Wokeness is no different. Anything can be taken too far. Exercise can be taken too far. Love can be taken too far. Anything can be taken too far. So wokeness definitely can be taken too far.
Yeah. Nice. I'm just looking for, like, somebody had said COVID vaccine, and when you said anything good can be taken too far, what came to my mind was polio vaccine. I don't know why.
Wow.
I have no idea why.
Wow. Okay. Okay, I'm not getting into that.
I'm sorry about that. But yeah, this
right.
Yeah.
I think there will be a lot more to talk about. We can probably schedule another live stream.
We should, yes.
And discuss that. I would love to talk about it after you're done with your book club. So I would love to hear your views on Van Gogh.
Yeah, and I think the beautiful thing about the book is because I think it's fictionalized, of course, but it also beautifully talks about the trauma that Vincent van Gogh carried around. And then you see multiple layers of it and how it comes in his art, how it comes in his interactions with other people.
Right.
And because it's fictionalized, it's more dramatic, of course, but that makes it all the more interesting.
Okay, you're convincing me to get the book. All right, I'll do it.
It's called Lust for Life.
Somebody's my moderator is here. He's asking, when am I going to live stream? Oh God. I'm streaming on Wednesday. Wednesday ko main aa raha hu.
That's nice. But this has been amazing, Sid. Thank you so much for joining and despite your schedule today. And I hope we can schedule a live stream super soon again. And
absolutely.
we can have conversations even deeper.
Yes, I was talking to Vaibhav the other day, and I was asking him if I would love to invite you guys to my channel and just talk about stuff. We'll plan something soon.
Yes, definitely. Thank you so much, Sid. And thank you so much, guys. We'll see you again.
See you, everyone. Bye.